Let's journey together to a gentler time and a mythic place. Settle in cosily under the blankets and allow your eyes to grow heavy. Feel the softness of your pillow and the slow, steady rhythm of your breath. With each exhale, release the worries of the day. With each inhale, invite a calm, drowsy comfort into your body. Now, as you sink into tranquility, imagine a world long ago when gods and goddesses roamed among ancient hills and valleys. Picture a warm golden light, like late afternoon sunshine, gently spilling across rolling fields. In the distance, you hear the faint whisper of a breeze as it stirs through tall grasses and wildflowers. A sweet, earthy fragrance of blossoms and fertile soil perfumes the air, soothing and familiar. In this peaceful ancient world, the boundaries between earth and sky feel blurry, like a dream. We are about to wander into a sacred story, one of a mother's love so deep it changed the very face of nature, and of a daughter's journey that brought forth the turning of the seasons. It is the tale of Demeter and her beloved daughter Persephone. Let the words wash over you softly, like a lullaby from a faraway time, guiding you into rest. Our story begins in an endless summer of ages past. Once upon a time, when the earth was young and the memory of creation still echoed in every living thing, there was warmth and abundance everywhere. In those days, fields of wheat swayed lazily under the sun, and bright flowers dotted every meadow. There was no drought or harsh winter, only gentle sunlight and timely rain. In that golden age of plenty, people and creatures of the world thrived, and nature's gifts were bountiful. Walking among those sunlit meadows was a kindly goddess named Demeter, whose hair was as golden as ripe grain, and whose smile was the first bloom of spring. Demeter was the goddess of the harvest and of fertile earth. Wherever her feet touched the soil, green shoots would spring forth. Wherever her gaze fell, orchards and fields burst into fruit and grain. She tended the world's growth with loving care, ensuring that humans had grain for bread and farmers rejoiced in rich harvests. Under Demeter's nurturing, the world knew only growth and prosperity, a gentle, endless summer of life. By Demeter's side, as radiant as morning dew on a petal, was her daughter Persephone. Persephone was young, with a laugh like the tinkling of a clear stream, and a heart as pure as a lily. They called her Kor, the maiden of springtime, for she embodied the beauty of youth and the promise of new life. Persephone moved through the fields and groves with joyful energy, and flowers seemed to blossom wherever she stepped. Butterflies flitted around her as she danced in sunbeams, and even the birds quieted their songs to listen to her humming as she gathered wildflowers in her arms. Mother and daughter were deeply devoted to one another. In the mornings, Demeter would gently braid Persephone's dark, glossy hair with garlands of freshly picked daisies and violets. In the afternoons, they roamed the hills together, Persephone skipping ahead to chase a butterfly or collect a particularly lovely bloom to show her mother, and Demeter following with a fond, watchful eye. In the evenings, under skies painted with soft pink and lavender clouds, they would rest beneath ancient olive trees, Persephone's head resting on Demeter's lap as the goddess combed her fingers through her daughter's hair. They spoke in murmurs about the day's small joys, a new flower opening by the stream, a family of rabbits nibbling clover, bereft of her child's companionship. Such was their life, peaceful, idyllic, and filled with the simple wonders of nature. The bond between Demeter and Persephone was unbreakable, a silken thread of love that wove mother, daughter, and the living earth into one. Under the gentle light of the sun, Demeter taught Persephone the secret ways of growing things, how a tiny seed nestled in soil could one day become a golden field of wheat, how every flower has its season to bud and bloom. Persephone listened with shining eyes, absorbing her mother's wisdom, her slender fingers tracing patterns in the rich soil, as if greeting the very earthworms and seeds below. Often, Persephone would wander just at the edge of her mother's gaze, venturing a little farther into the flowering meadows, but always returning with her arms full of blossoms and a smile lighting up her face. Demeter trusted her dear daughter to roam freely, for all was safe and harmonious in that eternal summer. The land itself watched over Persephone, from the towering poplar trees swaying gently overhead to the carpet of soft clover beneath her feet, and Persephone, in turn, brought laughter and light wherever she went. On one particularly fine day, the sky was a bright, endless blue, and the air was warm and still. Bees droned lazily among the wildflowers, and the distant hills shimmered in the noon light. Demeter had been blessing a village's wheat fields at the foot of those hills, ensuring a good harvest for the year. Persephone, free for the afternoon, wandered a familiar meadow nearby with a woven basket swinging in her hand. She hummed a quiet melody as she explored, her eyes drawn to every splash of colour in the grass. There were purple irises and orange crocuses peeking through green blades, and red anemones open to the sun. Persephone breathed in their gentle perfume as she drifted from bloom to bloom, the way one drifts through a pleasant dream. As the young maiden walked, she felt a peculiar hush fall over the meadow. The chorus of grasshoppers grew quiet, and even the breeze paused, as if holding its breath. In the stillness, Persephone's gaze was captured by something extraordinary at the edge of the field. There, near a shady grove of ancient oak trees, stood a single narcissus flower, unlike any she had seen before. It gleamed with an uncanny light, petals white as moonlight, and a centre of bright yellow. Its sweet scent drifted toward her, enticing and strangely enchanting. Persephone's heart filled with wonder. Setting down her basket of blooms, she stepped gently through the tall grass toward the narcissus. Each step seemed to echo in the silence. She knelt down to examine the flower more closely. It was breathtaking, a true marvel of the earth. Unbeknownst to Persephone, this flower was no ordinary gift of nature. It had sprung up at the will of mighty Zeus, the sky father and king of all gods, and through the deep plotting of Gaia, the earth herself. They had caused this miraculous narcissus to bloom as a lure, for destiny was quietly unfolding its secret plan for Persephone. Oblivious to any danger, Persephone reached out with delicate fingers and cupped the flower's bloom. The fragrance that wafted from it was overwhelmingly sweet, making her head feel light and dreamy. With both hands, she carefully plucked the narcissus from its stem to admire it. At that very moment, the ground beneath her gave a low, rumbling tremor. It was as if the earth, so solid and steady, suddenly became soft and fluid like water. Persephone gasped, her heart fluttering with confusion. She glanced around for her mother, but Demeter was still away in the distant fields. unseen and unaware of what was happening. Another tremor came, stronger this time, causing the meadow to shudder. Clods of soil broke apart around Persephone's feet, and the green turf split open right before her. A dark fissure yawned in the earth, widening by the second, and from its depths issued a chill wind carrying the faint scent of ash and iron. Persephone stumbled backward in alarm, the narcissus dropping from her hands. Fear began to rise in her chest. She was alone, and something unimaginable was occurring. Before she could react further, a sudden presence swept up from the darkness below. From the fissure surged a great golden chariot drawn by majestic black horses. The chariot was ornate but unearthly, wrought of gold and onyx, adorned with gleaming jewels that caught the sunlight as it emerged from the gloom. Guiding the thundering horses was a tall figure cloaked in sable black. His eyes were solemn and dark as night, and a crown of ebony metal rested upon his brow. This was Hades, lord of the Underworld, the brother of Zeus, and god of the realm of the dead. Hades' face, though stern, bore a kind of lonely nobility. He had felt the warmth of sunlight only rarely, for he dwelled in the deep places beneath the earth. At the sight of Persephone, frightened and radiant on the sunlit meadow, his heart was moved with love and resolve. For a long time, Hades had been enchanted by Persephone's gentle beauty from afar. With Zeus's secret permission, he had chosen this moment to claim Persephone as his queen, to bring her into his shadowed kingdom. All this Persephone did not know. She only saw a formidable stranger charging toward her with purposeful intent. Before she could turn to flee, Hades reached her. In one swift motion, he swept the trembling maiden into his arms and up onto his chariot. Persephone cried out in surprise and fear, calling desperately for her mother and even for Zeus, but her pleas echoed unanswered across the empty meadow. The birds had fallen silent, and not a single creature dared stir as the lord of the Underworld carried Persephone away. Hades pulled the reins, and the black horses reared with a furious energy, their hooves striking the ground like thunder. The golden chariot turned and dove back into the gaping fissure from which it had emerged. Persephone reached out a desperate hand toward the fading daylight above, her fingers trailing through the air. But it was too late. The earth began to seal itself shut once more. As the chariot descended into the darkness, the cleft in the meadow narrowed and closed behind it, swallowing up the last beams of sun. Clumps of grass fell back into place as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. The meadow grew quiet again, but it was a different silence than before, hollow, bereft of the maiden's laughter and the gentle harmony that had so long blessed this place. Only a single flower lay on the ground as witness to what had happened. The narcissus Persephone had picked, now crushed and wilting on the disturbed soil. Down and down the chariot raced, diving deeper beneath the surface of the world. Persephone clung to Hades as a rushing dark wind whipped around them. Her eyes stayed squeezed shut, and she sensed the sunlight above vanishing, replaced by cool, dim air. The clatter of the chariot's wheels on rock and the echo of the horses' hooves gradually changed in tone as they left the open chasm and entered the vast caverns of the Underworld. The noise became muffled, as if by thick curtains of shadow. After a time, the wildrosky grew smoother, and at last came to a gentle halt. With a jolt, all became still. Persephone opened her eyes slowly, her heart still pounding. ghostly glow. Hades had brought her to his kingdom beneath the earth, a place where no sun shines, but which holds its own hushed grandeur. All around, Persephone saw stretches of pale asphodel flowers glowing faintly in the gloom. These delicate white blossoms covered meadows of the underworld, their petals luminescent and still. The air was cooler here, carrying the scent of mineral-rich earth and something like the crispness of autumn leaves. In the distance, a great ebony gate stood open, guarded by a monstrous three-headed dog, Cerberus, the loyal guardian of Hades' realm. Yet even this fearsome creature lay quiet and mild as Persephone passed, wagging one of its tails gently, for it recognized that Hades brought a guest under his protection. Hades carefully helped Persephone down from the chariot. Though he had taken her against her will, he was not without compassion. His movements were respectful, almost gentle, as he guided the trembling Persephone through the gates of his domain. She walked by his side in a daze, trying to absorb her surroundings. They entered a broad avenue that led to Hades' palace. The path was lined with tall black poplar trees and willow trees, whose leaves hung like tearful streamers. Shadows danced beneath their boughs. In the distance, Persephone could hear the quiet flow of dark rivers, the rivers that encircled the land of the dead. The Styx, the Phlegethon, the Acheron, their waters murmuring secrets as old as time. It was a place of endings, and yet in its stillness there was a kind of peace. They approached the palace of Hades, which was carved from the very bedrock of the world. Its walls were fashioned of onyx and obsidian that gleamed in the pale light. High pillars reached up to support a ceiling studded with diamonds that sparkled like a multitude of tiny stars. Though shadowy, the hall they entered was magnificent and solemn. Hades led Persephone across a polished floor that reflected their figures dimly beneath their feet, as if the darkness itself were alive around them. Servants of the underworld, silently gliding shades, appeared to attend their lord. These spirits were gentle, offering Persephone a soft robe woven from shadow to drape around her shoulders, for the air in this realm was cooler than the sunlit world above. Persephone accepted it numbly, her mind still reeling and her heart aching for her mother and the bright fields she'd lost. Hades gestured, and a simple ebony throne rose beside his own. He indicated Persephone should sit. This was to be her seat, for he intended her to be queen by his side. Persephone hesitated, her hands trembling, but with no way to return home. She finally sat. The throne surface was cold and smooth. She felt very small and alone, overwhelmed by sorrow and confusion. In the silence that followed, Hades spoke softly to Persephone. The exact words are lost to time, but it is said that he tried to soothe her fears. He promised her great honor and power as his wife, the queen of the underworld. He offered her dominion over all that dwelled in his dark realm, the spirits of the departed, the hidden riches under the earth, such as gold and jewels, and the deep mysteries unknown to those above. He assured her that in his own way he would cherish her and do his best to make her comfortable in her new home. Persephone listened, but her heart was not swayed by treasures or power. She could only think of sunlight on her face and her mother's warm embrace. Tears glistened in Persephone's eyes, and one by one they slipped down her cheeks. Each tear fell onto the obsidian floor and glimmered briefly before vanishing, like a drop of dew disappearing at dawn. In a quiet, quavering voice, Persephone begged Hades to Hades' face grew sad, for though he was a god often feared by mortals, he was moved by the young goddess's grief. Yet he remained firm. Gently, he told Persephone that she was now bound to the underworld. She was to be his queen, and leaving was not an option he could allow. The fates themselves had decreed this union, he said, and it was not within his power or hers to undo what destiny had woven. Seeing there was no immediate escape, Persephone fell silent. In that silence, the enormity of what had happened settled over her like a heavy veil. She realized that for now, she was truly separated from everything she had ever known and loved. A fresh wave of loneliness washed over her, yet within that despair, fatigue crept in, the exhaustion of her fright and the strange journey through the underworld's depths. Her eyelids grew heavy, and though she fought to stay alert, her body trembled with weariness. Hades noticed her state and signalled to the silent attendants. They bowed and guided Persephone to a quiet chamber within the palace where she could rest. The chamber was lit with a soft silver glow from clusters of luminous mushrooms growing in the dark corners. The bed was carved from fragrant cedar wood and piled with plush cushions covered in fine, dark fabrics. It was not the familiar bed of flowers and soft grass that Persephone had known in the mortal world when she napped outdoors, but it was inviting enough for her tired body. As Persephone lay down, she realized she still clutched a small keepsake from the world above, perhaps a stray violet that had been caught in the folds of her dress, now slightly wilted, but still carrying a hint of spring's fragrance. This little remnant of her lost home brought her a bittersweet comfort. Pressing it close to her heart, Persephone closed her eyes. In the quiet of that underworld night, Persephone finally drifted into a deep sleep, filled with dreams of sunlit meadows. She dreamed she was running through the fields with her basket, chasing butterflies under a brilliant blue sky, and she saw her mother's figure in the distance, arms open wide. Though just a dream, it gave Persephone a measure of solace, wrapping her in a hopeful warmth even in the heart of darkness. So, Persephone passed her first night in the realm of Hades, suspended between despair and the faint comfort of dreams. The underworld itself respected her sorrow. Even the distant wails of ghosts and the usual restless murmur of wandering spirits fell mute in that hour, as if the dead held their breath out of sympathy for the grieving maiden. Meanwhile, far above in the bright lands of earth, Demeter finished blessing the village fields and returned to the meadow where she had last seen Persephone, expecting to hear her daughter's laughter or to see her twirling in the sunshine with baskets of flowers. Demeter instead found an eerie emptiness. The meadow was quiet, too quiet. The air held a faint chill that hadn't been there before, and the light of day seemed dimmer, as if a cloud had passed over the sun. At first, Demeter felt a flicker of worry. Perhaps Persephone had wandered a bit farther than usual. It was unlike her not to be within calling distance. Demeter called out in a melodious voice, "Persephone, my child, where are you?" Her words sailed over the rolling hills and quiet groves, but no familiar voice answered back. The only reply was the whisper of the breeze rustling through the grass. As moments passed and still no sign of her daughter, Demeter's worry blossomed into fear. She began to search the meadow, her eyes scanning for a glimpse of Persephone's footprints or the bright fabric of her dress behind a shrub. She found Persephone's half-filled basket of flowers lying abandoned in the grass. The sight of it made Demeter's heart tighten. Persephone would never leave her cherished flowers behind willingly. Demeter knelt and picked flowers inside were fresh, but scattered, as if dropped suddenly. Nearby, the ground was disturbed. Demeter's sharp eyes noticed broken turf and the slight scar of a split in the earth, now closed but still visible. She ran her fingers over the scarred soil, dread creeping into her mind. Something terrible had happened here. She could feel it in her bones. It was as if the earth itself bore witness to a trauma. With rising panic, Demeter roamed farther and farther, calling Persephone's name to every corner of the countryside. Her divine voice echoed off empty cliffs and returned as a forlorn echo. She asked every person she encountered along the roads, farmers, shepherds, travellers, if they had seen a girl, her beloved daughter, but no one had. No mortal had seen anything unusual. To their eyes, it was just a quiet afternoon. Demeter's heart pounded with increasing desperation. Day turned to dusk, and still Demeter searched. As the sun sank low and the sky bruised purple and orange, Demeter's golden radiance dimmed with exhaustion and anxiety. She refused to stop or rest. When night fell, she did not cease her search. Instead, she tore a great torch from the earth, a branch of pine which she lit from the dying light of the sun. Igniting it with a mere breath, a flame sprang forth, casting flickering light into the darkness. With one torch held high in each hand, the goddess continued her quest, appearing now like a solitary beacon of hope moving through a night-shrouded world. For 9 days and 9 nights, Demeter wandered ceaselessly over fields, mountains, and rivers, clutching her torches. She needed no sleep, no ambrosia, and no nectar. The only thing sustaining her was the hope of finding Persephone. Through moonless nights and sunlit mornings that brought her no peace, Demeter's appearance changed. Her lovely face grew lined with worry, her eyes red-rimmed from tears that would not fall. She wore the same dark cloak she had thrown on in haste when she first began her search, now travel-stained and heavy. The once bountiful goddess of the harvest looked like a grief-stricken shadow of herself. On the 10th morning since Persephone's disappearance, Demeter stood upon a rocky hill at dawn, her torch's light paling in the growing day. The new sun cast long rays over the land, but to Demeter, the world still felt cold and dark without her daughter. As she looked out over silent fields, a figure approached through the light mist. It was Hecate, the ancient goddess of witchcraft and crossroads, who often wandered at night with her own torches. Hecate had heard the echo of Persephone's scream days before, though she had not seen the cause. Out of compassion for Demeter, Hecate came to offer whatever information she could. Demeter, normally composed and regal, rushed toward Hecate with pleading eyes. Hecate's face was sorrowful. She had been fond of Persephone too, who often left small honey cakes or flowers at Hecate's hidden altars, being a kind and reverent girl. Hecate gently told Demeter what she knew. She confirmed that she had indeed heard Persephone's cry on the day she vanished, a heart-rending plea that echoed through the valleys. It came from nearby, she said, but by the time she reached the meadow, Persephone was gone, and the earth was still once more. She saw no one, only the fading sound of the maiden's voice. Though Hecate's news was sparse, it confirmed Demeter's worst fear. Persephone had not simply wandered off. Something or someone had taken her. Demeter's sorrow deepened, and her lips pressed into a grim line. A fierce determination flared in her chest. If a god or creature had stolen Persephone, Demeter would not rest until she demanded her daughter back, even if she had to challenge the order of the cosmos itself. Hecate, sharing Demeter's urgency, suggested they seek out Helios, the sun god, who from his high chariot sees everything under the sky. If anyone had witnessed Persephone's fate, it would be Helios, who daily observes the world from east to west. Demeter's eyes lit with a glimmer of hope at this idea. Thanking Hecate, she wasted no time. Together, the grieving mother and the torch-bearing goddess of night set out to find the sun. They found Helios as he was rising, guiding his golden chariot into the morning sky from the eastern horizon. In a secluded glade where the first rays of sunlight spilled through the trees, Demeter called out to Helios, her voice firm, yet edged with despair. She implored him to tell her if he had seen Persephone. The sun god, who looks down upon all the earth, surely knew something. Demeter reminded him of the many times her harvests had provided offerings for the gods, including to Helios himself, hoping to sway his heart. Helios slowed the pace of his fiery steeds and gazed down with pity at Demeter. The goddess who had always been generous in maintaining the earth now looked small and broken below. Helios had indeed seen what happened. Nothing escapes the sun's bright eyes. He descended a little from his high path, illuminating the grove in a gentle golden glow. Then, with a sympathetic yet reluctant voice, Helios revealed to Demeter the truth. He had witnessed Persephone picking flowers in the meadow, when suddenly the earth opened, and Hades, lord of the Underworld, rose in his chariot and snatched her. Persephone was now with Hades in his dark realm. At this revelation, Demeter's torches fell from her hands, and their flames died out on the damp ground. She stood motionless, absorbing each word. Hades, her own brother, the grim ruler of the dead, had stolen her child, and Zeus, the Sky Father, who held thunderbolts and ruled from Olympus, had allowed it to happen. Helios, in his honesty, did not omit that part. He gently explained that Persephone's abduction was done with the permission, perhaps even the collusion, of Zeus himself, who had decided that Hades should have Persephone for his bride. Demeter's shock turned to heartbreak, and heartbreak ignited into fury. A low cry of anguish and wrath escaped her lips. She felt betrayed by Zeus, the king of the gods, who was also Persephone's own father. How could he have bartered away their daughter without Demeter's consent or even her knowledge? The injustice and hurt weighed unbearably upon her. Overwhelmed by grief and rage, Demeter collapsed to her knees. Her fingers dug into the soil of the grove as silent sobs racked her. The agony of a mother learning of her child's fate rumbled through her, and for a moment the world itself seemed to respond. The skies dimmed, the sunlight faltered, as if eclipsed by Demeter's sorrow. Helios, wishing to offer some consolation, added that Hades, though stern, was not an entirely unfit husband for Persephone. He noted that Hades was a powerful god who ruled 1/3 of the cosmos, and that as his queen, Persephone would be honoured and well cared for. But these words were of little comfort to Demeter. Power and status meant nothing to her compared to her daughter's presence and happiness. She wanted Persephone safe by her side, free under the open sky, not confined to a sunless world among the dead. Demeter thanked Helios for his honesty, her voice quiet and hollow, then turned away. Hecate placed a comforting arm around Demeter, who now stared blankly ahead, her face a mask of grief. Demeter's tears ceased. In their place, an not accept this fate passively. If Zeus and Hades thought they could steal her child and let the world go on as usual, they were gravely mistaken. Demeter withdrew from the assembly of the gods. She refused to return to Olympus, refused any comfort from her divine family. Instead, she cloaked herself in a dark veil and began to wander among mortals in her grief and fury. The once gentle goddess now wore a face mortals did not recognize, that of a grief-stricken woman, eyes downcast and wild with sorrow. Before she left Helios's presence, Demeter made one solemn vow. Until Persephone was returned to her, she would not allow a single shoot to sprout, nor a single harvest to be gathered by mankind. She would make the world as barren and desolate as her heart had become. With that oath echoing in the air, Demeter vanished from the sight of the sun god, moving like a spectre across the lands, with only Hecate quietly trailing like a shadow. Demeter kept her word. As she wandered, her mind consumed with thoughts of Persephone, the earth around her responded to her grief. The once lush fields began to wither. Green meadows turned dull and brown. The leaves of trees curled and fell as if an early autumn had arrived. Normally, Demeter would nurture every plant and fruit, but now, in despair, she withheld her blessings. Farmers' crops failed to ripen. Seeds lay dormant in the soil. Across the world, a quiet hunger and worry spread among mortals who did not understand why the earth suddenly refused to yield its bounty. Demeter drifted through villages and wild lands, alike in the guise of an elderly woman, so that neither god nor mortal would recognize her. She hid her divine radiance and appeared as a weary, sorrow-stricken crone. In this form, she walked the earth alone. Hecate had returned to her own nocturnal crossroads, and Demeter chose solitude, wanting only to mourn in darkness. Eventually, Demeter's aimless journey brought her to the land of Eleusis, near the city of Athens. By the time she arrived, Eleusis' normally green fields were suffering like everywhere else. Stalks of barley drooped, orchards stood leafless, and the land was parched as if it too grieved. Disguised as she was, Demeter sat down by a public well, shaded by an olive tree just outside the town's gates. This well, called the Maiden's Well, was a gathering place for the women of Eleusis who came to draw fresh water. Demeter sank onto the well's stone ledge, drawing her dark cloak around herself. She looked like a travel-worn old woman, bent with sorrow and age, her eyes cast down at the dust by her feet. As the sun dipped toward late afternoon, the daughters of King Celeus of Eleusis approached the well, balancing their bronze water pitchers. They were 4 young princesses, full of grace and gentle laughter, though their cheer had been muted lately by the strange failure of the crops. When they saw the solitary old woman at the well, they paused. Even in disguise, Demeter had a noble presence that perceptive hearts could sense. The eldest princess stepped forward and greeted the stranger kindly, asking if she needed help or a place to stay, noting she seemed alone and travel-weary. Demeter looked up at the girls. For a moment, their youthful, concerned faces reminded her so much of Persephone that a lump rose in her throat. Fighting back tears, she forced a faint smile and replied that indeed she was in need. She gave a false name, Doso, and wove a tale to explain her presence. In a trembling voice, Demeter, as Doso, claimed she had been carried off by pirates from her home, but had escaped their clutches and wandered overland, eventually arriving in Eleusis with no family or home. As she spoke, her eyes brimmed with genuine tears. Though the story was invented, the grief behind it was very real. The princesses were moved by the old woman's plight. They stepped closer, expressions full of pity and warmth. They mentioned that their mother, Queen Metanera, had a newborn son, baby Demeter. Perhaps, they suggested, their mother might welcome an experienced nurse to help care for the infant. Such a position would give the old woman, Doso, shelter and purpose. They knew their mother to be kind and likely willing to aid a woman in need, especially one who appeared wise and gentle. Demeter, hiding a spark of hope beneath her grief, agreed humbly to their suggestion. She thanked the girls for their kindness, her voice quavering with gratitude. The princesses, glad to help, gently helped the frail-seeming old woman to her feet and led her through the city gates toward the palace of King Celius. Within that modest but comfortable palace, Queen Metanera received the stranger graciously. Upon hearing her daughter's account of meeting Doso at the well and the tale of her misfortunes, the queen's heart went out to the woman. Metanera offered Demeter, whom she knew only as Doso, a place by the hearth to sit, and a cup of soothing barley water mixed with mint, the cooling kykeon that was a customary drink for weary travellers. Demeter, who had refused sustenance in her mourning, accepted this simple drink. As the cool liquid passed her lips, she felt a tiny measure of relief trickle through her, the first nourishment she had taken since Persephone's disappearance. Afterward, Metanera gently inquired if Doso would consider staying on as a nurse to her infant son. She spoke of little Demophone lovingly, noting that an experienced, caring nurse would be a blessing, especially in these troubled times when the land itself seemed cursed. In return, Metanera promised Doso a home, respect, and the warmth of their family. Demeter bowed her head and agreed, murmuring a soft thanks, not only to the queen, but to any fate or fortune that had guided her here, to a place where she might find a sliver of comfort. Thus it was that Demeter came to live in the palace at Eleusis, caring for the royal infant. In her heart she was still broken, but tending to Demophone offered a small distraction from her pain. The innocent coos and needs of the baby stirred Demeter's maternal instincts. As she cradled the child, singing ancient lullabies in a quavering voice, she found bittersweet comfort. Often as Demeter rocked Demophone, she thought of Persephone, wondering if anyone was cradling her daughter with such tenderness in the underworld. In tending Demophone, Demeter poured out a fraction of the endless love she yearned to give her own child. Day by day, the infant prince thrived under Demeter's, as Doso's care. The household noted how strong and content the baby boy seemed with the new nurse. He rarely cried when Doso was near, and his eyes followed the old woman with fascination and trust. Queen Metanera marvelled at the nurse's calming influence on her son, and felt grateful that Doso had come into their lives. As Demeter grew more attached to Demophone, a bold plan took root in her mind. Stricken with the loss of her own daughter, she decided she would give this mortal baby an extraordinary gift. She would make him immortal, freeing him from the pain of illness and the doom of death that all humans face. It would be a way to both thank the family for their kindness and to fill a tiny part of the void in her heart with a noble purpose. If Demophone could live forever, untouched by mortal sorrows, it would also be a secret triumph for Demeter during this dark time. Late each night, place was quiet and all others slept, Demeter began a secret ritual. She anointed Demophoon's soft skin with ambrosia, the food of the gods, whispering blessings over him as he lay content in her arms. Then she placed the baby in the centre of the roaring hearth fire. To any mortal eye this would have been terrifying, but Demeter used her divine power to protect the child from harm. The flames did not burn Demophoon. Instead, they enveloped him gently, purifying his mortal flesh bit by bit. Each night, as Demeter held him in the fire, the boy remained unharmed and silent, bathed in a warm, otherworldly glow. Through this ritual, Demeter was burning away the boy's mortality, intending to make him as deathless as a minor god. Night after night this continued, and Demophoon grew more robust and beautiful. But Demeter kept the ritual hidden, knowing that fear might prevent the royal family from understanding her actions. However, Queen Metanera's curiosity and unease grew. She had noticed an odd, peaceful light glowing under the nursery door in the deepest hours of the night, and wondered what the nurse did while alone with the baby. One midnight, unable to contain her concern, Metanera quietly approached the nursery and peeked in through a small crack in the door. What she saw made her gasp in horror. Old Nurse Doso stood in the hearth's flames, holding Demophoon. Both nurse and child were bathed in fire. Metanera believed her son was being burned alive. In a rush of terrified love, she flung open the door and let out a scream, startling Demeter out of her trance. Metanera's cry echoed through the halls. The queen rushed forward, arms outstretched to snatch her child from the fire. Demeter, swift as only an immortal could be, lifted Demophoon from the flames and into her arms, just as Metanera reached them. The infant, far from being hurt, gurgled happily at leaving the warm fire, as if it had been a comforting cradle. He reached a tiny hand back toward the blaze, as though he missed its warmth. For a tense moment, Demeter's concealed divinity flared in frustration at being interrupted. She had been so close to completing the child's transformation. But she saw Metanera's face, ashen with horror and love for her son, and Demeter's anger softened into understanding. The goddess realized how her actions must have appeared to a mortal mother. With a heavy sigh, Demeter gently placed Demophoon in Metanera's trembling arms and decided it was time to reveal herself. As the queen clutched her baby, fearing the worst, she noticed with amazement that he was perfectly fine. Before Metanera could react further, the old Nurse Doso stood taller, and a brilliant aura began to radiate from her. The crone's cloak slipped away to reveal a figure at once youthful and imposing. Golden hair unfurled down her shoulders, and her eyes shone with the intensity of a harvest sun. Demeter had unveiled her true form, no longer a poor old woman, but a mighty goddess in her full glory. The room filled with a gentle radiance, and the air became sweet with the scent of ripe wheat and wildflowers. Metanera fell to her knees, holding Demophoon tightly against her as the truth washed over her. She had been hosting Demeter, the great earth goddess, unawares. King Eleusis, awakened by the commotion, rushed in and immediately joined his wife in prostrate reverence when he saw the divine light and recognized Demeter. The four princesses, peeking from behind their parents, quickly followed suit, bowing their heads. Though their eyes shone with awe at seeing their kind nurse's miraculous transformation, Demeter looked tenderly at the mortals kneeling in fear she said with regret. That possibility was now lost because the ritual had been interrupted. The goddess understood why Metanera had acted as she did. A mother's protective love is powerful, and Demeter could not fault the queen for it. The queen wept with relief and regret, relieved her son was unharmed and blessed, yet regretful for having unknowingly prevented the wonderful gift Demeter sought to bestow. The king and queen both begged Demeter's forgiveness for their ignorance, tears of humility and gratitude in their eyes. Demeter's heart, though weighed down by her own pain, was moved by their sincere devotion. She reached out and touched the child's head with her fingertips, soothing both him and his mother. Persephone giggled and reached tiny hands toward the goddess, enamoured by the golden light around her. Demeter then assured the king and queen that Persephone would always carry a special blessing from her. He might remain mortal, but he would grow to be a strong, wise man, favoured by the earth. He would bring great honour to Eleusis and be cherished by Demeter in all his days. Before departing, Demeter instructed King Celeus and Queen Metanira to build a great temple in her honour on a hill just outside the city, near the well where she had first rested. In that temple, she said, she would establish sacred rites and teach them mysteries to perform in her name, rituals that would ensure her favour and demonstrate the deep truths she had learned in her sorrow. These would become the mysteries of Eleusis, rites so holy that those who learned them would gain comfort and hope, with the promise of spiritual renewal akin to the return of spring after winter. Having given these instructions, Demeter prepared to leave. She cast one more loving glance at Persephone and the family that had shown her kindness. She extended her hand, and one of the princesses, bold in her affection, briefly touched the goddess's fingertips in farewell, a gentle gesture that made Demeter smile sadly. Demeter then drew her dark cloak around her once more and stepped away. The brilliance of her divine form dimmed as she resumed a more modest appearance to mortal eyes. King Celeus and his family remained kneeling until the goddess left their sight. True to their word, they would soon raise a temple where she decreed, and from that day, Eleusis would become a sacred place for Demeter's worship. Demeter left the palace and walked out into the early dawn light, alone again. The family of Celeus watched from the doorway as she departed. They thought she looked like a lonely, noble woman as she wandered beyond the city walls. Persephone whimpered softly in his mother's arms, as if sensing the loss of his divine caretaker. Metanira held him close, silently thanking the gods that Demeter had come to them, even in disguise. Outside Eleusis, Demeter found a quiet hillside and sat down upon a large stone. The sky was turning pink with the sunrise, but she did not greet the light with her usual joy. Persephone was still lost to her, and the ache in her heart was as deep as ever. She had found a brief distraction in caring for Persephone, but now her arms were empty again. The world remained barren, and her sorrow remained unsoothed. So Demeter remained in that newly built temple at Eleusis, cloaked and grieving. No one could persuade her to lift her mourning or her curse on the land. She yearned for Persephone with every breath and kept to her resolve. Nothing would grow until her daughter was returned. The effects of Demeter's grief were felt far beyond Eleusis. With the goddess of the harvest refusing to let anything grow, the whole world slid gradually toward calamity. Normally, golden fields lay empty and grey. The rich smell of fertile soil ready for planting was replaced by the dry scent of dust. rivers ran low, since even the rain clouds held back their gifts, as if sympathizing with Demeter's sorrow. Cattle found no fresh grass and bellowed hungrily. People across the lands began to starve. They consumed whatever grain stores they had saved, but with no new crops forthcoming, they feared the worst as the months dragged on. Weeks passed in this way, with Demeter hidden away in her temple at Eleusis, her face set in sorrow and anger. She missed Persephone with every fibre of her being. In her mind, she replayed memories of her daughter's laughter, of Persephone's bright eyes, and wondered ceaselessly if her daughter was safe, if she was crying or calling out for her mother in that dark realm. Each time those thoughts grew too painful, Demeter's resolve hardened further. The earth itself would know no joy or bounty until her own joy, Persephone, was returned to her. Up on Mount Olympus, home of the gods, the divine beings grew uneasy. They watched the mortal world with increasing concern. Normally, offerings from humans, sacrifices of food and incense, prayers of gratitude over bread and fruit, rose up daily to Olympus, strengthening the gods with worship and the scent of devotion. But now altars were cold. No fresh harvest meant no grain or wine to offer. Many humans were too weak or heartsick to hold festivals. The lack of reverence and celebration made the gods restless. Moreover, their compassion for humanity's suffering stirred. After all, without people to honour them and thrive under their care, what would become of the natural order? Zeus, the king of the gods, sat upon his high throne of clouds, observing the crisis with a furrowed brow. He realised that Demeter's grief and wrath could not be ignored. Her power over the earth was too great. If she persisted, humanity might perish, leaving a world of silence and desolation. Something had to be done. Zeus first sent forth Iris, the fleet-footed rainbow goddess, and his faithful messenger to speak with Demeter at her temple. Iris glided down to Eleusis, her robes shimmering with all the colours of the rainbow, even in the gloom of the failing harvest. She found Demeter shrouded in her dark cloak, sitting upon the cold temple floor near the altar's extinguished fire. With respectful words, Iris delivered Zeus's message, an appeal to Demeter to return to Olympus and restore fertility to the earth. Zeus promised Demeter anything she wished, any honours or power, if only she would let the world become green again. But Demeter's heart was unmoved by promises of honour. She responded simply and sadly that until her daughter was returned to her, she would not return to Olympus, nor allow life to flourish. No reward or plea could change her mind. Iris, sorrowful, returned to Zeus with the heavy news that Demeter refused to be swayed. Zeus then dispatched one god after another to reason with Demeter. Bright Apollo came, radiant with sunlight and music, offering words of comfort. Artemis, the huntress, approached with sincere empathy, for she too cherished young maidens and understood a protective heart. Wise Athena even visited, offering counsel and the perspective of justice. They brought gifts and gentle arguments. They tried to persuade Demeter that the world desperately needed her mercy. They pointed out how many mortal lives were at stake, how prayers for deliverance rose from every corner of the earth. Yet Demeter's answer to each was the same. Only the return of Persephone could lift her spirits and her curse. She would not budge. Realizing the severity of the situation, Zeus finally understood what must be done. It had been by his nod of agreement that Hades took Persephone. Hermes would suffer. With resolute determination, Zeus decided to send an emissary to the underworld itself. He summoned his son Hermes, messenger of the gods, who was swift and clever and could travel between realms. Hermes, with his winged sandals and cap, came at once before Zeus's throne, light on his feet yet serious in expression, for he too grasped the gravity of the matter. Zeus spoke in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder, giving Hermes a decree to deliver to Hades. Persephone must be released back to her mother. No delay or argument would be accepted. It was the will of Zeus that the girl come home, for Demeter had to be appeased to prevent the ruin of the world. Hermes accepted this mission and immediately set out. He leapt from the gleaming halls of Olympus and dove down toward the dark gates that lie at the earth's roots. As the psychopomp, the guide of souls, Hermes was no stranger to the underworld. He had escorted many spirits along that path, but today his purpose was different. Not to bring a soul down, but to retrieve a living goddess and bring her up. Hermes flew over the lands with the speed of the wind. In his hand he bore the herald staff, the caduceus, which holds the power to pacify and grant safe passage. When he reached a secret cleft in the earth, hidden from mortal eyes, he began his descent. Down through a hidden path he went, one known only to immortals, spiraling into gloom. He passed through caverns where shades of the departed drifted like mist. The souls recognized him and whispered as he passed. Some reached out longing for a chance to return with him, but Hermes kept his focus and did not tarry. At length, Hermes arrived at the banks of the Black River Styx, the great boundary between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. The ferryman, Charon, eyed Hermes from under a hooded cloak, but recognizing the messenger of Olympus and noting the divine light he carried, Charon wordlessly ferried him across the dark waters. The boat slid over the Styx's still surface, which reflected the dim ghost lights of that realm. On the other side, Hermes stepped onto the ashen ground of Hades' domain. Cerberus, the great three-headed hound, approached, growling softly, but upon recognizing Hermes, the creature let him pass with only a curious sniff at his ankles. Through the fields of asphodel, Hermes walked briskly, passing countless spirits who wandered among those pallid flowers. These phantoms murmured in confusion to see a living god stride among them, a rare sight in the land of the dead. Hermes kept his eyes forward, making directly for Hades' palace, where he was sure to find Persephone. In the throne room of the palace, Hades sat upon his ebony throne, with Persephone by his side on a smaller seat. Weeks had passed since her arrival, and though Persephone's heart still ached for her mother, she had begun to carry herself with a quiet dignity as queen of the underworld. Hades had shown her the workings of his realm, how souls were judged, the quiet meadows of Elysium, where the virtuous found rest, and the dreary plains where ordinary shades wandered. He had given her a diadem of dark jewels for her brow, a symbol of her status. There was an unspoken respect growing between Hades and Persephone. While she did not choose her circumstances, she was making the best of them, and he admired her grace and fortitude. She, in turn, recognized that beneath Hades' stern exterior Palace guards, shades in bronze armour, bowed and stepped aside as Hermes approached the thrones. Hades looked up, surprised to see a visitor from Olympus. Persephone's eyes widened with hope when she saw Hermes. A flutter of joy stirred in her chest, for she knew he might bear news of rescue, or at least a message from her mother. Hermes gave a respectful bow and addressed Hades in clear but courteous tones. He relayed Zeus's command that Persephone must return to the world above. He explained that Demeter's unyielding sorrow had halted all life, and nothing would grow until Persephone was reunited with her mother. The survival of mortals and the balance of the world depended on Persephone's release. Hades listened in silence, his expression unreadable, though the flicker of his dark eyes betrayed inner emotion. He did not want to surrender his wife, whom he had truly come to love in his own reserved way. Yet he knew Zeus's command was not to be taken lightly, and he knew as well that if all living things perished, eventually even his own realm would be diminished, with no new souls to arrive, and the cosmos out of balance. After a long pause, Hades inclined his head in agreement. In a voice like stone softly shifting, he said he would allow Persephone to return to her mother, for the sake of the world and at Zeus's behest. Persephone gasped softly as joy rushed into her heart. She was really going home. A tentative, radiant smile bloomed on her face, the first true smile since she was taken. Hermes felt relief too. His mission was on the verge of success, and he was glad to deliver such happy news. However, Hades was not without his own stratagem to ensure Persephone's eventual return to him. As he agreed to let her go, he approached Persephone with a parting gift. From a nearby table, he picked up a ripe red pomegranate, a fruit that grew in the gardens of the Underworld. He gently broke it open, revealing a cluster of juicy, jewel-like seeds inside. Hades offered a few of those seeds to Persephone. He spoke kindly, urging her to eat so she would not be hungry on the long journey back to the surface. In her excitement and naivety, Persephone accepted the gift without suspicion. She had eaten nothing in all her time in the Underworld, and the sight of the sweet seeds suddenly made her realize her hunger. Persephone placed the seeds in her mouth and ate them, finding their taste rich and sweet, with a pleasant tartness. She did not know that to partake of the food of the Underworld was to bind oneself to that realm. Hermes observed this silently, realizing the significance, but arriving too late to intervene. A faint, knowing smile tugged at Hades' lips as Persephone finished the last seed. Yet the Lord of the Dead said nothing more of it. He only signalled for his golden chariot to be prepared for her departure. When the chariot was ready, and the time came for Persephone to leave, Hades escorted her to the palace gates. Persephone felt a swirl of emotions. She was eager, ecstatic, to return to her mother, but as she looked at Hades, standing in his dark grandeur, she found she bore him no malice. He had caused her sorrow, but he had also shown her a solemn sort of kindness. In a soft voice, Persephone thanked Hades for his hospitality and for treating her with respect. She assured him that she understood his loneliness and that she would not forget what he had done for her, for better or for worse. Touched by a pang of compassion for the lonely ruler, Persephone even found herself promising quietly that she would return to him, as the laws of the gods demanded. Hades gave a faint, sad smile and nodded, accepting her words. Then, under Hermes' guidance, Persephone stepped onto the chariot. The black horses pawed at the ground, eager to depart. With a last lingering look at Hades, who stood watching her, stone, retracing the path through gloom. As they ascended, the darkness thinned, and the chill of the underworld gave way to a gentle warmth. Persephone's heart pounded, not with fear now, but with anticipation. She saw the first rays of sunlight filtering down through an opening above. In a thunder of hooves, the chariot burst out into the world above, emerging through a cleft in the earth onto an open field. The sky was wide and blue overhead, dotted with soft white clouds. Persephone stepped down onto the grass, breathing in the fresh, fragrant air of spring. She felt the kiss of the sun on her skin and nearly wept with gratitude. All around her, tender new grass and early wildflowers trembled in a mild breeze, as though whispering welcome. Not far across the field stood Demeter. The mother had been waiting on this plain, guided by an unerring mother's intuition to the spot where her daughter would return. Each day since Hermes had departed, Demeter remained in that area, neither daring to fully hope nor able to abandon hope. She watched the earth carefully for any sign, her heart yearning. Now, as the ground opened and a golden chariot rushed forth, Demeter's breath caught in her throat. When she saw Persephone's familiar form step out of the fissure and onto the field, disbelief and overwhelming joy collided inside her. For a heartbeat, she was stunned. Then, with a cry that was half sob and half laughter, Demeter began to run. Persephone saw her mother at that same moment. "Mother," she cried, her voice ringing through the air, filled with happiness. She lifted her skirts and ran as fast as her feet would carry her, arms reaching out. In the middle of the field, mother and daughter came together in a loving, crushing embrace, both sinking to their knees in the soft grass. Demeter threw her arms around Persephone, holding her as if she would never let go again, as if ensuring her daughter was real and solid and safe. Persephone clung to her mother just as tightly. They laughed and cried all at once, overwhelmed by relief and love. Demeter kept murmuring words of endearment, calling Persephone her darling, her sweet child, and saying how she had feared this day would never come. Persephone, through her tears, told her mother she had missed her every moment, and that finally she was home. Each reassured the other that they were together again and safe. Each touch, each glance was like a miracle. As they embraced, the world around them transformed. Where Demeter's tears of joy fell upon the earth, bright green sprouts emerged. Under Persephone's feet, flowers of every hue blossomed spontaneously. The air, which had been cold and still for so long, grew warm and gentle. Birds, silent for months, now broke into song in the nearby trees. It was as if the earth itself was celebrating their reunion. Spring, which had been halted, burst forth exuberantly in that instant. Hermes stood by respectfully near the chariot, witnessing the miracle of life blooming around the pair. His task was fulfilled, and this heartfelt reunion was reward enough for his efforts. After giving them a few moments, he approached with a warm smile. Demeter finally loosened her embrace enough to look up at Hermes, still holding Persephone's hand, as though she might vanish if let go. Demeter's eyes, once dulled by grief, now shone with gratitude. She thanked Hermes with all her heart for bringing her daughter back. Hermes inclined his head humbly. He replied that it was Zeus's command, but he was glad to have been the messenger of such joyous news. With that, Hermes bid them farewell, taking the chariot and horses to return them to the underworld, and then flying off toward Olympus to report all that had transpired. snatched a strand of hair from Persephone's face, just as she did when Persephone was a little girl, and Persephone closed her eyes, leaning into her mother's comforting hand. After some time, Demeter's joy began to temper with a lingering worry. She drew back just enough to search Persephone's face. There was a new gravity in Persephone's eyes, a subtle change. Demeter's motherly intuition prickled with concern. Her daughter had been through a profound ordeal. Surely there might be conditions to her return. With a soft, steady voice, Demeter asked the question she dreaded. Had Persephone eaten anything while in the underworld? Persephone, innocent and not fully aware of the rule, answered truthfully that she had accepted a few pomegranate seeds from Hades and eaten them because she was so hungry before leaving. Demeter's heart sank even as she maintained a calm exterior for Persephone's sake. A shadow of worry crossed her face. She knew the ancient law that anyone who consumes the food of the dead must return. Gently, Demeter embraced Persephone again, holding her close, as if hoping she could shield her from what was to come. Persephone, sensing her mother's tension, looked up with growing concern. Before Persephone could question further, a new presence made itself known in the field. A soft roll of thunder sounded from a clear sky, and a cool breeze swept over the blossoming grasses. In a shimmer of golden light, Zeus himself appeared, and with him came the regal form of Rhea, Demeter's mother and Persephone's grandmother. They had come to ensure the resolution of this fraught situation. Demeter rose to her feet, still holding Persephone protectively by the hand. Though she respected Zeus as king of the gods, she fixed him with a wary, piercing gaze. Zeus approached with his hands open in a placating gesture. His voice, deep and resonant, spoke of his relief that Persephone was safely returned and how the earth was already coming back to life. He complimented Demeter's strength and Persephone's bravery. Demeter remained silent, her jaw tight. She could not yet let go of her anger that Zeus had allowed the abduction in the first place. Rhea stepped forward, her presence exuding gentle authority and love. She first went to Demeter and Persephone and embraced them both. In that embrace, Demeter felt a bit of her tension ease, as one feels when a mother comforts them, and Persephone felt the warmth of a grandmother's unconditional affection. Rhea's voice was soft as she expressed her joy at their reunion. Then Rhea turned to address the matter of Persephone's fate. Looking to Zeus, she spoke with wisdom and urged a just compromise. Zeus solemnly confirmed what Demeter already feared. Because Persephone had eaten food from the underworld, she could not remain above permanently. The laws of fate were clear, and even he would not break them. However, Zeus proposed the arrangement that would become the cycle of the seasons. Persephone would spend part of each year with Hades in the underworld, and the remainder with Demeter in the world above. Specifically, for each pomegranate seed Persephone had eaten, she would spend 1 month below. By most accounts, Persephone had eaten 6 seeds. Thus, she would stay with Hades for 6 months of each year, and live with her mother for the other 6. If we go by other traditions, where she ate 4 seeds, she would spend 4 months below and 8 above. In any case, her time would be divided. Zeus spoke gently as he outlined this compromise, emphasizing that in this way, Persephone would never be completely lost to either world. Hades would have his queen for part of the year, and Demeter would have her beloved daughter for the rest. Balance would be restored, the earth would be allowed to bloom again, and mortals would not perish from famine. Demeter listened, tears of frustration gathering in her eyes. It was not the perfect outcome she had wanted. She wanted Persephone free and with her always. But she knew even Zeus could not simply undo the binding magic of the Underworld's food. Before she could respond, Rhea spoke softly in her ear. Rhea reminded her that even when Persephone was in the Underworld, it was not a true death or a permanent goodbye. She would come back. Rhea suggested that they view Persephone's yearly descent and return as part of the natural order, something that could ultimately give hope to mortals, that even in the darkest times, light and life return. Persephone looked between Zeus and her mother, her hand squeezing Demeter's tightly. She was grateful to be back and frightened of having to go again, but she also felt a surprising tug in her heart, acknowledging that what Zeus said made sense in the grand scheme. She had, after all, made a promise to return to Hades. Part of her, however small, felt a sense of responsibility or even compassion toward the lonely king she'd left behind. Still, her primary feeling was a dread of leaving her mother once more. Finally, Demeter nodded slowly. Assent, given though her face was wet with tears she hadn't realised were flowing. In a soft but firm voice, she accepted the arrangement because she had to, but she added her own vow. When Persephone was with her, the earth would flourish in abundance, and when Persephone was gone, the earth would mourn with her, lying barren and cold. This way, everyone, gods and mortals alike, would mark Persephone's presence and absence. Zeus bowed his head in agreement to Demeter's terms, for indeed, it was already happening. The earth had flourished just now as Persephone returned, and Demeter's gloom had previously brought on the first autumn and winter. He proclaimed that humans would come to understand these changes as the seasons. When Persephone was below, they would endure winter, and when she returned, spring and summer would follow in her footsteps. It would be a cycle of loss and reunion, sorrow and joy written into the world itself. Persephone, wiping her tears, managed a smile for her mother. She promised Demeter that she would always hurry back, and that she would think of her every day while she had to be away. Demeter embraced her again, pressing her cheek to Persephone's. She whispered that they would make the most of their time together, filling it with laughter and love, so that when Persephone returned to the Underworld, she would carry that warmth with her, and Demeter would sustain herself with the hope of their next reunion. Rhea, seeing the acceptance in her daughter and granddaughter, declared her pride in them. She blessed them both, Demeter for her courage and steadfast love, and Persephone for her resilience and grace. Rhea also spoke a blessing to the world that these new seasons would be kind to mankind, and that the lesson of Demeter and Persephone's love would never be forgotten. With that, Rhea gently departed, her form fading into the morning light like a comforting dream, leaving as one wakes. Zeus, his role done and the balance restored, also took his leave. Before vanishing, he approached Demeter and Persephone one last time, gently placing a hand on each of their shoulders. He looked into Persephone's eyes, a father's remorse evident there, and softly told her to take care and that they would see each other on Olympus soon. To Demeter, he gave a nod of respect and apology, acknowledging the pain his decision had caused, even as it led to this new cosmic order. Then, in a shimmer of lightning and cloud, Zeus was gone, returning to his lofty realm. At last, Demeter and Persephone were alone again, on the flowering field, save for the gentle presence of nature rejoicing around them. The mother turned to the daughter, and they months of separation, their bond would remain unbroken. Persephone agreed, fresh determination shining in her eyes. They had weathered the worst and come through it with an unbreakable bond. Hand in hand, Demeter and Persephone began to walk across the land. With each step they took together, new life blossomed in their wake. The field that had been barren moments ago was now carpeted in green. Flowers sprang up in rainbow hues where Persephone's feet touched the ground. Grain and corn began to shoot from the soil where Demeter's gaze fell. The world was awakening from its enforced slumber. Villagers from a nearby hamlet who had been half-starved and praying for relief gasped in amazement as they saw shoots emerging in their fields and fruit trees bursting into bloom out of season. Word spread like wildfire that Demeter's forgiveness had been won and that the earth was coming back to life. People who had been too weak to celebrate now found the strength to lift their hands to the sky in thanks, tears of joy on their faces. They did not know the full story, but they knew the great goddess of the harvest must have found what she sought and was giving life back to the world. Demeter and Persephone eventually returned to Eleusis, where Demeter found that the people had, in her honour, nearly completed the temple she'd requested. Together, mother and daughter entered that temple. Demeter showed Persephone the place where she had mourned, and together they offered humble thanks for their reunion at the altar. It is said that in that moment, Demeter initiated Persephone into the secret mysteries that she had shared with the Eleusinians, rites that symbolized death and rebirth, the descent and the return, reflecting what Persephone herself had been through. Persephone wept anew upon hearing how her mother had grieved and what lengths she had gone to while searching. And Demeter in turn wept to hear Persephone describe the underworld and how she yearned for the sunlight each day she was gone. They comforted each other in that sacred space, turning painful memory into a foundation of understanding between them. The people of Eleusis, seeing smoke rising from the temple's new hearth and flowers blooming all around, rejoiced. Demeter and Persephone emerged from the temple to bless them. Crops began to grow vigorously once more. The famine was over, and the fields of Greece would soon be heavy with grain again. And so it was that mother and daughter spent the rest of that year together, never straying far from one another's side. Persephone often wore a garland of her favourite flowers, and Demeter's once sombre face gleamed with serenity again. They savoured each day, walking in the gardens, laughing by streams, or simply holding hands in comfortable silence as they watched sunsets fade into starry nights. The world around them flourished in tandem with their happiness. Yet, as with all cycles, the time eventually came when the leaves began to dry and the days grew shorter. The first hints of autumn appeared in the reddening of grapevines and the golden turn of some leaves. A slight chill crept into the evening breeze, reminding both goddesses of what was to come. They did not avoid the truth. The time for Persephone to return to the underworld was drawing near. When that day arrived, Persephone and Demeter embraced for a long, long time. Both shed tears, but they were not tears of despair as before, rather tears of love and the sadness of a temporary farewell. Persephone promised her mother that she would think of her every day in the underworld, and Demeter promised to keep the earth alive, if quieter, during her daughter's absence, and to await her return with hope. In a beautiful chariot, sent up by Hades at the agreed time, Persephone once again travelled to the realm below, this time willingly and with dignity, as as its queen. Demeter watched the earth open and then close after Persephone, her heart aching, but braced by the certainty that her daughter would come back to her. As Persephone disappeared, the flowers around Demeter closed, and the fields began to go fallow. Trees released their leaves to drift down in shades of amber and brown. The world shifted gently into the melancholy beauty of autumn. Demeter remained vigilant through the autumn and into the winter, tending the world in a different way. She did not allow the famine to return. That pact was resolved. Instead, she simply let the earth rest. Grains and fruit slept as seeds and roots beneath the soil. The lush greens of summer gave way to the quiet whites and greys of winter. Frost painted delicate patterns on the landscape, and snow fell to tuck the world in. During these months, Demeter's face was often sad and distant. She spent much time in the Eleusis temple or wandering the empty fields, lantern in hand, as she used to with her torches, though now in memory rather than frantic search. Yet Demeter endured the separation with patience, sustained by the unbreakable promise that Persephone would be hers again when the time was right. And indeed, when the agreed months had passed, the shoots of new grass and the buds on branches heralded what Demeter already felt in her heart. Persephone was returning. The cycle continued, and mother and daughter were reunited with the coming of each spring, their bond reaffirmed and their joy spilling once more into growth and abundance for all the world. And so, from that time forward, the world knew seasons. When Persephone is on earth, from early spring through the bright days of summer, Demeter's joy makes the world bloom and thrive. These are the months of abundant wildflowers painting the meadows and golden grains dancing in the fields. Trees grow heavy with green leaves and sweet fruit, and every creature rejoices in the warm embrace of the sun. During this time, mother and daughter roam the valleys and hills together once more. Demeter shares with Persephone all that flourishes under her care, from the first snowdrops of spring to the reddest roses of high summer. They laugh in the sunshine, weave garlands of fresh blossoms in each other's hair, and bless the earth with their loving presence. This is the season of spring and summer, a time of light, growth, and plenty, a reflection of Demeter's happiness at having her child by her side. But when the time comes for Persephone to return to her throne beside Hades, a change falls upon the world. As Persephone gently kisses her mother goodbye and descends once again to the underworld at the end of the harvest, Demeter's heart grows heavy with sorrow. She withdraws her warmth from the soil and the sky. The days begin to shorten. Sunlight becomes weaker, as if dimmed by tears. Leaves on the trees lose their green hue and drift to the ground, painting the woodlands in shades of amber, russet, and gold. As beautiful as they are melancholic, the rich green fields fade into stubble and brown, and a chill creeps into the air. This is autumn, the bittersweet farewell, when Demeter lets the world's growth slow and fall asleep as her daughter departs. She pours her energy into the final fruits of the year. The harvest is gathered, the wheat is stored, the grapes are pressed, and then she allows herself and the earth to quietly grieve in the falling leaves. Then comes winter, the time of Demeter's deepest sorrow and the earth's great rest. In the cold months, the earth lies barren under frost and snow. The once vibrant gardens and orchards stand naked and still. Demeter, mourning, retreats to her sanctuary or wanders enters the empty world, her demeanour quiet and distant. The world mirrors the goddess's mourning. Winds blow with a lonely howl across empty fields, and the sun, pale and distant, offers little warmth. Yet even in this starkness, there is a peaceful stillness, a time for the soil to rejuvenate, for seeds to lie in wait, and for the world to sleep and dream of spring. It is as though nature itself sympathises with Demeter, slumbering alongside her through those lonely months. But winter is not forever. The cycle continues, and hope is never truly lost. Deep beneath the frozen ground, seeds and bulbs lie quietly, holding the potential of life within them. They endure the cold, just as Demeter endures her loneliness, both awaiting the moment of return. At last, when the destined months have passed, Persephone comes back again, emerging from the underworld like a tender shoot pushing through snow. As mother and daughter reunite, Demeter's delight sweeps across the world, heralding spring's return. Fragile green sprouts break through the thawing earth. Buds swell on tree branches, ready to burst into bloom. The scent of blossoms, cherry, almond, violet, drifts on the mild breeze once more, and birds begin to sing dawn choruses to welcome the growing light. The air itself feels fresh and new, as gentle rains wash away the last traces of winter, and the sun's rays grow warmer day by day. The earth awakens with a soft sigh of relief and joy. Every year, without fail, Persephone's arrival brings renewal. It is as if the world itself takes a fresh breath after holding it through the long winter night. Lambs are born in the fields, and butterflies emerge, their bright wings a testament to transformation. Every living thing knows the Queen of Spring is above ground again, and Demeter's love pours out through every root and bud to nourish the land. In this way, Demeter and Persephone's love lives on in the turning of the seasons. Their story plays out again and again each year, a time of togetherness and abundant life, a time of parting and quiet yearning, and a joyous reunion. The ancient Greeks saw this pattern and honoured Demeter and Persephone with festivals to mark each phase, sowing seeds with hope in spring, reaping with gratitude at harvest, and enduring the lean months of winter with faith that Persephone would return. They understood that the sorrow of loss and the joy of reunion are intertwined parts of life's great rhythm. Even now, we can feel their story in the world around us. Each spring's first flower pushing through the soil is Persephone's footstep upon the earth. Each summer's bounty of grain and fruit is Demeter's generous smile made manifest. Each autumn's falling leaf is a gentle echo of Demeter's tears as she waves farewell to her daughter. Each winter's hush is the earth waiting, like a mother by the door, for her beloved child to come home. As you lie here now, cozy and safe, perhaps you can sense that ancient comfort, the understanding that bleak times are temporary and that warmth and light will always return. The tale of Demeter and Persephone is not just one of loss, but of reunion and the eternal bond between parent and child, between love and life, a bond so powerful it moves the very cycle of the year. Now, in the stillness of your room, imagine yourself walking through a quiet forest at the cusp of spring. The ground is soft with moss beneath your feet. Above, bare branches are just beginning to show tiny buds of green. You feel the last cool breath of winter on your skin, but also a gentle ray of sun touching your face with delicate warmth. In the distance, you hear the faint trickle of melting snow feeding a clear stream, the whisper of new beginnings. The air is crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth reawakening. In this tranquil forest, you find a small clearing where snowdrops and crocuses poke their heads through patches of lingering snow. You sit down on a smooth, time-worn log, cushioned with soft lichen moss. Closing your eyes, you breathe in deeply. The breath fills your lungs with the cool, invigorating air of early spring. As you exhale, you feel tension leaving your body, as if the earth itself is drawing it out and grounding it. With your eyes closed, you notice how alive the forest is, even in its quiet. You become aware of your own heartbeat, steady and calm, echoing the heartbeat of the earth. Each inhale is like the earth preparing for spring, and each exhale is like releasing the hush of winter. You feel deeply connected to the land around you and to the story you've just heard. The story of a love so enduring it became part of the world's very fabric. Above you, a gentle breeze stirs, making the bare branches creak softly, a friendly, hushed sound. Perhaps it is the wind carrying a message from Demeter and Persephone, reminding you that you're part of this grand cycle too. The rays of sunlight through your closed eyelids feel warm and comforting, like a mother's hand resting on your forehead. Allow yourself to drift in this feeling. The story of the seasons has been quietly planted in your mind like a seed. In the rich soil of your imagination, it is unfurled into images of blossoming fields and starry underworld nights, of heartfelt embraces and the patient sleeping earth. Hold those images gently, then let them begin to dissolve like morning mist. It is night now in our world, a time for rest, a kind of winter of the day, when we let go of our busyness and settle into quiet. Just as Demeter waited through the long winter nights for the spring, we too can find peace in this dark, gentle moment, knowing that a bright morning will eventually come. Feel your body relaxing further into your bed. Your breathing is slow and steady, like the soft ebb and flow of the tides, or like the rhythm of seasons turning. With each breath out, feel any remaining tension melting away. With each breath in, invite calmness and warmth to fill you, as sure as spring follows winter. Your heart beats calmly, in tune with the ancient heartbeat of nature. You are warm, safe, and held, as loved and protected as a child cradled in a mother's arms. In this state of comfort, you might imagine Demeter herself tucking a soft blanket of summer meadow over you, while Persephone crowns your brow with a light garland of sweet dreams. In your mind's eye, perhaps you see Persephone and Demeter one last time, strolling together at twilight in a sunlit field. Wildflowers nod gently around them in the evening breeze. Demeter's arm is wrapped around her daughter's waist, and Persephone leans her head on her mother's shoulder. They are content, cherishing the moment. The sky above is awash with the colours of day's end, soft purples, pinks, and gentle golds. A beautiful transition, much like the seasons themselves. As stars begin to twinkle one by one, mother and daughter walk slowly homeward, their figures growing dim and eventually dissolving into the twilight, leaving only the fragrance of night-blooming jasmine and the sound of distant crickets in their wake. Now, let your own consciousness gently dissolve into the quiet of the night. There is no need to hold on to any thoughts now. You can set them down basket of flowers left in the meadow. They will be there in the morning if you need them. For now, it's time to rest, to trust in the cycle of day and night, of wakefulness and sleep. The cycle of day and night, like the cycle of seasons, is steady and assured. After darkness comes light, and after light, darkness, in a never-ending, gentle dance. You are a part of that natural, divine rhythm. So, with Demeter's comfort and Persephone's hope warming your heart, you can safely drift off into the sweet abyss of sleep. Feel the gentle weight of your eyelids and the heaviness of your limbs as you surrender to gravity. Each breath you release carries you further into a safe, peaceful slumber. The story has been told, the journey completed, and now it is time for dreams to carry you onward. May your dreams be as gentle as a spring rain, as comforting as summer sunlight, as insightful as autumn's quiet reflection, and as restorative as the silent winter's rest. Sleep now, dear listener, cradled by this ancient tale and the promise it holds. The promise that dawn and spring will always come, bringing new life, new hope, and endless love. Good night.